Hello and welcome back to Savage Garden, an Interview the Vampire podcast sampling immortality one morsel at a time. I'm Kat and I'm once more joined by my companion on this journey into everlasting night, Naomi. And today we are finally starting season 2 as we begin with the first episode, What Can the Damned Really Say to the Damned? Just because we did it last season, this is the 12th ranked episode according to IMDb with a rating of 8.1, so it's kind of towards the bottom.
I've always been quite open that this is probably the episode that not that I like the least, but I will reach for the least probably. I think it has two absolutely extraordinary sequences in it, but it is effectively a filler episode because by the end of this episode, nothing that really happens within it has had any significant meaning apart from the present day sequences on the rest of the series. This is the show giving the story room to breathe and not just going, hi, here is series 2, Claudia and Louis are now in Paris. I think most other shows would have started with them in Paris and shown flashbacks, but this shows them trekking all over Europe. And it's beautiful for them to do so. I love the little glimpses into the Louis-Claudia relationship, which I think is really fascinating. But as a story, there's not a huge amount to it. This particular episode was directed by Craig Zisk, who also directed the infamous episode Don't Be Afraid, Just Start the Tape. And I believe he is directing the Series 3 opener as well. It was written by Hannah Muscovich. And we need to take a moment to recognize the incredible work of the cinematographer Stuart Howell, who I think's lighting, particularly at the end of the episode in the you and me and you sequence, is astonishing. And Stuart very sadly passed away last year. And it is the first appearance of Delainey Hayles as Claudia, which is announced in a beautifully theatrical way with the full title sequence that says, the role of Claudia will now be played by Delainey Hayles, and I love that. We are equal love Claudias here. Both Bailey and Delainey are both extraordinary in the role, and she is incredible. And where we left off, so Louis and Claudia have had the big Mardi Gras party in New Orleans, and they have basically killed Lestat, killed Antoinette and a ton of partygoers. They've dumped Lestat at the dump for him to. Claudia is quite happy he's dead. Louis, well, I think we have to accept that Louis probably knows he's not dead, and they've vanished off to Europe to go and find vampires. And this episode is all about the Louis and Claudia relationship, which thankfully isn't as creepy and as incestuous as it is in the books, because in the books it's a bit particularly when she's meant to be 5, very unpleasant. But what I kind of love about the Louis Claudia relationship, and I think we see it play out very much in Paris, is that they love each other as fiercely as they resent each other. Because at this point, what's Claudia? She's in her 30s or 40s, and to be frank, she's just done with these mentally ill uncles in her life. You know, she doesn't want to be dealing with all this gay drama. She just wants to go and live her life. And one of the talking points that still remains to be seen is how much she perhaps over-egged the pudding when it comes to Lestat's behavior towards her. The train scene seems to be in dispute now since the clips from the Series 3 trailer. I think we always felt it's the worst sequence in the entire series, and as such, probably a bit off. Do you think?
Yeah, it feels like there's definitely a little bit of embellishment to some degree of I mean, I think we discussed before, it's her diary, it's her inner thoughts, so I think we all interpret arguments and things, slightly different to perhaps how an outsider would view them. So I feel that there was definitely some encounter between them, because obviously she ends up, back living with them under duress. So something bad went down. Quite how bad it is, I think, yeah, you're right, remains to be seen.
And I think the thing is, like, as we've always said, we're not giving Lestat any Father of the Year awards here. We're not excusing his behavior. The bottom line is, we know, even as we recognize that Louis's memories are a little bit fallible, a little bit malleable, the bottom line is he comes back from that night when he's obviously suicidal, comes in the house, and Claudia is sat there looking terrified and furious, and Lestat has obviously dragged her back off the train. The only thing I think that's probably really in dispute is whether he threatened her with her own rape or not. Because I suspect that's going to be the element of, that's the bit that seems slightly over the top, but we have to, we have to accept that him dropping Louis is not something that's up for debate. That happened. It was horrific. It shows that Lestat has this profoundly toxic part of him when he thinks he's going to be left alone because he's so terrified of it, that will lash out, that has the potential to hurt and to kill his family. So again, we're not going, oh, sweet little Lestat, he can do no wrong. No. He dragged Claudia back. He deserved precisely what's coming to him. But I've always felt that Claudia never quite appreciated how much Louis loves Lestat. She doesn't understand it. She doesn't get it. Because for her, Lestat was kind of beneath her, I suppose. And I don't think she ever realized that he did see her as a child, as his child. So I feel like she always underestimates the hold that Lestat has on Louis. So when they're here wandering around war-torn Europe, she's just a bit like, Jesus, Louis, it's 5 years ago. Get over it. And it's like, he killed the love of his life to come and make sure that you were happy and to get your freedom. And I don't think she ever really grasped what Lestat meant to Louis. She's so desperate for kin and so desperate for her freedom. But if it turns out she did lie in her diaries to get Louis to kill Lestat because she knew she'd never get Lestat to kill Louis. Although in the context of the show, with Lestat having dropped Louis, I'm not sure that's as clear as it would otherwise have been. But I suspect Lestat still wouldn't go as far as outright murdering him. I mean, honestly, that's Queen stuff. Good for you, Claudia. Good for you. Deciding, you know what? I am done with these men. Can you imagine living in that New Orleans house at the point at which the murder got? They'd not left the house in years, had they? So they're
It's
living
true,
in
yeah.
there. They've not left at their house in years. Everybody nearby thinks that they are supernatural creatures, wizards, warlocks. They recognize they're leaving protection spells, everything else or not protection for them, protection against them outside the house. I mean, that's not really a fun experience for a girl who wants to live it up to be living in. So yeah, she's done. She is done. So all credit to you, my sweet angel Claudia. If you were like, you know what, let's just get this party started and let's go. So good for her. So we start off with first, apart from the beautifully theatrical reveal of Delainey's name, we get the opening credits changing for the first time to replace New Orleans with war-torn Europe. It's a really beautiful graphic, that one, I think. It's really nice. And we
Yeah, I
start
think all the
with,
opening credits have been good.
yeah, they're good. They're beautiful. I mean, it changes to New Orleans, doesn't it? And then we also changes to Dubai towards the end of the series. And it's just really well done. It's really well done. And we start with this really like melodic voiceover of Jacob Anderson as Louis relating Claudia's diaries. And it's all a bit grim, we should say. It's all very brown and grim and war-torn. We had the filthy Louis and Claudia scrabbling their way across Europe, sleeping in the dirt. And then we get a voiceover from Armand saying, some would say a poorly timed holiday. And I think we have to give credit that I don't think people really give Armand credit for just how funny he is. Armand is
Oh yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
I love Armand. They did that. AMC are a bit random in what they will and won't promote, but they suddenly produced that really old recording of Sam and Jacob from SGCC, and Louis being the biggest Armand hater is the funniest thing in the world. But equally, Sam adoring him is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Going, oh, I love Armand. Of course you should. He's funny. Assad Zaman's delivery is amazingly entertaining. And Daniel Hart's music, stunning throughout this episode. I think
Mm.
this is my favorite episode of his in terms of the music. It's just peak. And then we have a little glimpse of our dear vicious Claudia whipping the heart out of the guy and hurling it to Louis to eat. Is that kind of the first time we see them doing that in terms of the vampire law? I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well that she is the one looking after him because obviously the outward facade is that he is the parent, but in
Yeah.
this instance, it's yeah, it's the mother lioness sort of feeding her cub, isn't it? She's gone for the kill, and now she's sharing spoils with her child to keep him alive.
Yes, yes, because if Louis was depressed in New Orleans before everything, I can't imagine that dragging him around Europe for 5 years, eating appallingly tainted blood, was probably tremendously good for his mental health. I imagine that it's been a profoundly, I think Dreamstat later on calls it a grim wayfaring exercise, which it is. It's very grim.
Also, Claudia isn't talking to him either. So like
No.
he's gone on this trip, but she's not talking to him. So he's doing all of the, he's completely miserable and he's doing this for her. But I mean, she tosses him a heart so that he doesn't starve, but she's not giving him anything outside of that.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. And it's a brave choice as well from a writing perspective to introduce a new iteration of the character, a new actress with a role in which Delainey doesn't get until we get to Romania a ton to do here apart from be a bit bratty, really. So I think it's a really brave choice to kind of start off the episode, and you're kind of a little bit like, you find yourself going, Jesus, Claudia, he killed his husband for you, and you're just not being appreciative. But then, of course, we have to stop and think, well, why should she be appreciative? You know, she's doing what she wants to do. She's the one that's had to drag him with her. He didn't do the one thing that she asked of him, which was to permanently remove Lestat and the fear of Lestat from their lives. So yeah, she's pissed off. And I mean, she calls him dead weight, and that is brutal. But I can understand from Claudia's point of view, that's precisely what he is. And we get our first look at season 2 Louis, and he is. I mean, he looks. Oh, just shout out to how ridiculously stunning Jacob Anderson looks throughout this episode. A bit of brown, dismal color scheme and mud does nothing for this boy. He's stunning. Um, but in modern day Dubai, he is always pretty much black clad, always in mourning. And we get this comparison now to Armand, who Daniel knows who he is, and is side eyeing the shit out of him. And we've got Armand and Zaman dressed in a white shirt, which he seems to be allergic to doing up all the way to the top. I don't know. I presume if all the buttons are done, something terrible happens. And he is vividly orange-eyed because obviously he's not wearing the contacts anymore. And yeah, it's an interesting contrast of Louis in mourning in black, and then this difference with Armand sitting there looking like the most beautiful angel you've ever seen. And Daniel is just absolutely fucking done with the pair of them at this point. He's being petty as hell about Armand being there and continually because Armand refuses to go on the record. But you know what? It was so sweet of Armand to be so supportive of his Louis, to just be there by his side all the way through this interview. What a supportive boyfriend he is.
Just chipping in the occasional sort of catty comment, which obviously is going to be disregarded because, as you say, he's off the record. So
Yeah, what a king. What a king. And then we get Claudia and Louis and their warfaring ways. I love that it shows how quick and clever Claudia is. Again, as you said, it's not Louis learning the language, Louis finding his way around. It is Claudia who has learned the language, and who is the first to completely decimate the German patrols. I mean, she's basically a completely deranged vampiric Indiana Jones at this point. You know, wandering around, desperately trying to find relics of ancient vampires. She's furious with Louis for not burning Lestat. But they're all just, and then we have that scene where she, as you said, she just won't speak to him. So Louis is doing the whole thing of like talking to her. And then, they say they're drinking misery and hopelessness. And Louis says he wants to go home. And it has to be like, can you imagine how shit it must have been for Louis to be like, hey, let's go back to New Orleans. Louis, my angel, you left an entire house of dead people. You murdered your husband. It's not like they were at the edges of New Orleans society. They were very much a central part of it. They were very much a central part of it. They vanished after murdering everybody. And yet Louis is so fed up of everything in wandering around that he's like, hey, why don't we go home to what would be an immediate lynching, I imagine, from everybody nearby. Because they're not going to care about Lestat, because Lestat towards the end was still being afforded all the social graces and niceties that comes with being a white man, but his social status was slipping because, to be frank, he was considered what, a queer? Yeah, the people around him knew that he was with Louis for whatever context that would be in the 1930s and 40s. And so whilst he would still always be afforded more grace than Louis on account of the color of his skin, his social status was very, very much slipping. I mean, they were in New Orleans for too long. They needed to move. But yeah. But I imagine it's profoundly rough to be in the middle in present day reading your dead daughter's diaries and hearing her call you a dead weight.
100%.
Poor Louis. And Daniel is bored senseless by all of this, which I get. He starts detailing the amount of times that Louis has been talking to about war-torn Europe. He's being an absolute grump about them being deceitful and being hilarious to real Rashid, who's Ballygill, I think. Very, very entertaining performance by Eric Bogosian. And my favorite thing throughout series 2 is that Naomi doesn't have to pretend. He just finds Daniel absolutely delightful. He just, the whole way through this series, if you look, Eric, oh God, my brain is gone. Asa Zaman is making absolute heart eyes at Eric Bogosian in pretty much every sequence. The entire episode where he tells him about Lestat and the coven and everything, just all the full on heart eyes. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then we get the brutal line of Louis saying, my love run a theatre company for 150 years, to which Daniel, without taking a beat, responds, your love was in a box with a premeditated neck wound in front of Armand. Just absolutely reading Armand and Louis for filth there. Just so inappropriate. And Armand just takes it in his stride. Unworthy in San Francisco, unworthy in Dubai. I mean, it's just like, get a hotel room, you guys, because, Louis is sat right there. You're being filthy. You're being filthy devils. I love it. I love it. I think Asazaman is so, so good throughout this series. He runs a really difficult thread of being adorable and funny and sexy and very, very chilling all at the same time. I think he's
And it
great.
is nice though that he is out in the now that his vampire nature is out in the open, so we can drop all of the cosplaying as the help, which I think is much needed, and we can finally get to the character a lot more than who is this like overstepping servant all the time.
Yes, because I'm slow. And as I said, I think I still had the visual image of Antonio Banderas in my head. So I kept waiting for somebody similar to pitch up as Armand, which I have no idea why, because of course Armand in the book is a teenage ginger. So I don't know why I had that vision in my head, but that's what I was kind of waiting. And I just kept being like, who is this servant? Like, because the dynamics of the relationship with Louis were always off, and that it was always clear that this servant had way more power than Louis, supposedly. But yeah, it is much more freeing, much more entertaining to watch Asazaman really show what he's capable of instead of sitting behind an iPad and being quippy. So it's a delight. Um, and then we get the series' first appearance of Dreamstat. Give it up for Dreamstat. Um, which is, of course, just a clever way of the show to keep Sam Reid, because otherwise he wouldn't have been in pretty much all of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. I do think and it is an issue with the narrative, and it's an issue with the film as well, that after in Neil Jordan's film adaptation, after they off Lestat and run to Paris, obviously you've got Antonio Banderas slinking around the screen, but things do kind of dip a bit. You have Stephen
Yeah.
Rea as Santiago in that sequence. And I think, particularly in this series, with the way it had been built up, if Sam Reid had just vanished for 8 episodes, I think it might have been a bit of a struggle. You need the recognition of Lestat being there, and this was a really clever way of doing it. Neil Jordan actually did an AMA very recently over the weekend, and he said he'd seen the TV series, which was exciting. But it was interesting that he comments that it was interesting that they felt freer in terms of the sexuality, but not in terms of keeping Claudia that young, which he felt affected Lestat's desire to have a family to keep Louis with him. I don't agree with that, because I think, the way Bailey Bass played it is so young. I don't actually think it had that much of an impact on the series. And I
No, I
think,
mean we've discussed before
yeah,
that Kirsten Dunst was iconic, but I don't think that what series did was any issue.
no, and I think there is an element of you have to do something different. Like, obviously, we've just watched the absolute heaving horror show that I cannot conceive that you have watched more than once, Queen of the Damned. And, this shows Aaliyah show. See, I've just done it. This is the problem. Akasha and Aaliyah are absolutely intertwined in everybody's head,
Yeah.
even though, as I found out to my absolute shock, she's not in the film that much. But all the iconography is Aaliyah. So whoever they pick, I think, and they still haven't announced her, and I wonder if they're going to announce her at New York Comic Con or keep her for a surprise reveal at the end, maybe. That'd be quite a long time to keep that secret for, but we'll see. I wonder if they're going to go Middle Eastern or Egyptian, which is Akasha's ethnicity in the books, but I think they're going to have to go wildly different with the costuming as well, because you cannot touch that costume. It's too iconic. It's too iconic. And everybody just looks, and just even if they don't know Akasha, they will look at the t-shirt or something and say Aaliyah. So they have to go quite differently with it, I think. But yes, we have our little Dreamstat, and all I could think was how incredibly cold Sam Reid must have been lying on that floor. It looked grim, and the gag reel for this sequence is really, really funny, because he was supposed to be on some sort of rig that lifted him up, but it didn't work. So Sam Reid just basically had to lie on something and then like bring himself up. And Jacob Anderson just kept cracking up at him, which is fair enough. And obviously, my favorite thing about Dreamstat is that he's not real. This is entirely Louis' subconscious reflecting on whatever it needs to reflect on at the moment. And we have to question how mentally well Louis is, that he is imagining his brutally murdered husband to tell him that he misses him in order to make him feel better. Louis,
I mean, he just wants somebody to talk to.
He
Claudia's
does.
not talking to him. He just needs somebody to talk to.
So he imagines Lestat, who's like, "Oh, I miss you, despite our recent unpleasantness." You mean the part where you ripped his throat out? And yeah, I mean, they've been wandering around for 4 years. I mean, poor Louis, that must have been miserable. And like, I get Claudia's Indiana Jones skills, but 4 years of wandering around for nothing is just a bit grim. And it's hilarious that Louis' subconscious is like, "Oh no, you don't need to apologize," which he doesn't. He doesn't need to apologize for killing Lestat. But his subconscious is like, you don't need to apologize. You ruin it with remorse. It was a perfect betrayal. And Dreamstat starts off super menacing in this episode because Louis is obviously racked with guilt. He's terrified he's still alive. And then as the series progresses, he effectively becomes like a comfort blanket, like a cuddly toy. He's there to say all the lovely things that Louis is looking for in his life. And he does say, as you said, he's fed up. He came by invitation. This isn't something that has been foisted upon Louis. Louis wants this vision of his husband to help him. He needs it. Poor Louis. I feel like antidepressants would have been so much more helpful for him. And then we get the incredible line about he'd taken 7,000 souls by that point, and Lestat was the only one that felt like murder. That's a lot of people, Louis.
It is when he had his vegetarian era as well.
Yeah. I mean, I was just like, how have you eaten 7,000 souls? You got turned. You kind of whined about it a bit, to be super honest. You were veggie for all that time, which significantly impacted on your ability to do anything. So are we saying he's eaten like 6,000 people in those 4 years?
Or is he including the souls of the animals? Because he doesn't say people, he says souls. And obviously you need to eat a lot of rats.
True.
To make
Very good catch. Very good catch. Louis is the kind of sensitive person that would be like, all of my little ratties are included within that. Yeah, so I'll buy that. Because it's a lot of people for him to have scoffed. If you'd said Claudia, yeah, I wouldn't have blinked, because that woman is a little killing machine. I'm so proud of her. But Louis, that feels like a lot. Delainey, we obviously we don't encourage smoking on this podcast, but Claudia smoking looks cool as fuck in this episode. Delainey Hayles with her hair back, looking proper, like Parisian war-torn chic. Amazing. And then we reach Romania, where we've got Claudia and I love the completely bewildered looks as they see the Soviets shooting the dead bodies in their coffins. And Claudia is absolutely giddy about all the garlics and crosses everywhere because she quite correctly ascertains that means that there are vampires in the area. Whereas Louis is weirdly resistant to that. He's like Scully in the X-Files, being all like, well, just because they have crosses and garlics doesn't mean there's an active vampire. And it's like, Louis, bro, you think they care about that when, these are people starving in Romania where everything's been bombed and the Soviets have invaded. Like, they're not going to be worrying about iconography unless there's something actually there eating them.
Mm.
I love my boy, but sometimes he's not that sharp. This entire section is a teensy bit of a slog, I think. I don't know what you think.
Yeah. Yeah, where they get scooped up by by some of the survivors in Romania, and there's this. I guess it's just like a slice of life in what war torn Europe was like, but it doesn't really do anything. I mean, you get the picture of Louis' sister banded around a lot as his wife, and then the intrepid reporter is always by those intrepid reporters. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't the right paper. This would be 30 years old. But yeah, it doesn't really do anything other than, I guess, just position where it was, historically, which I think we've already got at this point. We all know about World War II. I think what we've seen previously is enough to convey, okay, so whilst the war was on, they were traveling across Europe. I don't think we need them hiding in a bunker talking to survivors.
Yeah, I agree. And this entire section also doesn't entirely work as it is heavily predicated on all of the people in that building seeing Claudia as a child, which she very, very clearly isn't. I actually don't know Delainey Hayles' age, but she looks slightly older than Bailey, which I think is primarily because Bailey has absolutely ginormous eyes, which help make her look quite youthful. But I would say Delainey looks kind of like an older teen as Claudia. What, 14, 15? You're not going to look
Yeah.
at her and think she's 9. You're not going to look at her and think she's a child. So when we have um, all the sequences about Amelia, who is the trapper survivor that they find, not saying bad things in front of Claudia because she thinks she's a kid, it just doesn't work visually. I sort of know why they did it, but I'm amazed that somebody didn't say, look, this doesn't work. The whole thing where you have Claudia going to play with the other children doesn't work because Delainey Hayles is so very clearly not a child. And I need to say, because I've seen a lot of commentary about Delainey that very much creeps into misogynoir because she's a darker skin tone than Bailey, and we are having absolutely fucking none of that on this podcast. But she just doesn't look 9. And that's fine. It would have been
Mm.
incredibly hard to find anybody that looked that young. And you don't really want it either, because if you've got the relationship with Madeline, which is dodgy in and of itself, if they'd gotten somebody who looked 10, it would have been very icky. I mean, it was fine for them to get
Yeah.
Kirsten Dunst, it was supposed to be 5 in it, but yeah, Delaney to me looks like 15, 16 in this. So it all works perfectly for all of it, because it would still be, you can't give the dark gift, presumably, to a teenager. So it all works perfectly for what it needs to do. But on this sequence where we're trying to pretend she looks like a little girl, it doesn't work. But we have this sequence. Obviously, the key to this sequence is Louis realizing that his memories are not as clear as they could be when he suddenly repeats himself with this absolutely meaningless piece of info about Amelia not having said the bad things in front of Claudia, but it's Louis realizing, oh, hang on a minute, maybe my memories aren't quite what I thought. And of course, the millisecond that Louis is like, oh, hang on a second, that's not what I remembered. Armand tries to stop the interview. He just is trying to be a supportive boyfriend, guys. He just wants to give his beloved Louis some time. But no, the second anything to do with memory comes up, Armand immediately tries to stop it. The boy is not slick. And then we've got Daniel, who, he's an investigative reporter, but it takes him a wee while to work out that Armand is continually trying to stop the story, I've got to be honest. But he goes into another rant because he wants to know who tells him everything and then says, here's almost all of the story. And I really hope that real Rashid got hazard pay for having to deal with all that nonsense, because that would get tiring quickly. But then we have, this sort of juxtaposition between Louis just chilling out with everybody in Romania, whereas, of course, again, they are, quite apart from the fact that they're the only vampires in a room full of humans, they are noticeable by being obviously the only two black people in the room, which Amelia comments kindly by saying they're not used to seeing men with good looks, which is sweet of her. And he is drinking with the slightly odd, slightly stereotypical Brit. Again, it's one of those accents where you can't work out if they're British or just trying to be really over the top, you know what I mean? And we have Claudia meeting her first vampire outside of Louis, Lestat, Antoinette, and Bruce. And of course, it is basically a ghoul who attacks Claudia. And then back in the Romanian bunker, we have Louis being delightful and funny and calling himself a magical vodka negro. Because he's like, look, bro, this is the first time in 4 years where I'm somewhere warm, where there are human beings, I'm listening to beautiful music, and I have booze. Leave me be. Just leave me be. Stop whittering on about politics or whatever else you're doing. Just leave a boy be. And he goes off to dance with Amelia. And Claudia reappears, and I love how obscenely excited Claudia is about the vampire while Louis is casually resetting her shoulder. There's just something so sort of morbid about that, about her being like, yay, there are vampires, while he's busy, reestablishing her shoulder. And then we get the fact that Claudia still hasn't forgiven him when she says, unless he wants to take you ballroom dancing and tell you you're pretty, you're not interested. Which Louis does not react well to. And again, she's complaining that Louis has bought Lestat with him. But again, I'm like, girl, it's like you're both. Claudia is fascinating because she's both very sheltered and very old at the same time. It's like, again, I think maybe she just hoped that when she got Louis away from Lestat, he would magically forget him.
Yeah.
That was never gonna happen. It's like, ow, girl, what did you think was gonna happen? I think she just thought that Lestat was everything that was wrong with their lives, and that once they magically removed him, everything was gonna be fine, only for them to, of course, continually blunder into worse and worse situations. So yeah, I do feel for her, but I always maintain that she just never quite got the depth of their relationship. And Louis is just fed up to the back fucking teeth by now. He's been doing this for 5 years. He's calling them the Adam and the Eve of the, he's asking if Claudia's looking for Adam and Eve of the damned. And all she wants is kin. And it's hard to feel, angry at her because that's all she wants. She just wants somebody that's not terrible. And this is the biggest sadness of Claudia in her life, is that she's just looking for someone to be kind to her, to be nice to her. And when she finally, because she doesn't, and if Lestat was capable of even a second of grown-up communication, she would have realized how loved she was in that household. But he is not. We'll be seeing Gabriella in the new series, who is entirely to blame for this. But he has been he's been raised, he has no idea of how to be a decent parent. We then get what is the first of my two favorite sequences in this episode, which is the astonishing sequence of them falling asleep in that boiler room and modern day Louis realizing that Claudia could dream despite what she put in her journal. And it's such a beautiful sequence. And it's one of those sequences that, again, if this wasn't genre, would have had Jacob Anderson winning every single award possible for. It is such a beautiful scene because he is so open and so raw and so vulnerable. And we have, Eric Bogosian as Daniel having to literally look away because it's so much for him to look at. And the realization that she could dream and that she was just not fibbing in her diaries, but overstating it. And it's just such a gift for Louis to realize that actually during that time she did have that escape of her dreams. And she could dream nightmares, but she could also dream beautiful things. And I think it's a really, really beautiful gift for him. And it's just, I mean, there aren't words for how good Jacob Anderson is in this scene. He is absolutely astonishing because most people would have been slightly ashamed to be so raw, so open, so vulnerable in that scene, and he just absolutely nails it. And he should have won all the awards in the world, and he did not. And I am sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good thing. 'Cause obviously, this has come. I think earlier on in the episode, he mentions that she couldn't dream, and he is equally stressed about the concept of not being able to dream. Because,
Yeah.
You can have a nightmare, fine, but surely that is preferable to just shutting your eyes and there being nothing. So it is this big kind of moment for him where he realizes that no, she could dream. And yeah, okay, sometimes that might have been bad, but as you say, sometimes it would have been good. And at least she wasn't completely vacant.
Yeah, because he's terrified about the notion of it being a void. And when he realizes, he flashes back to kind of like incredible trauma in terms of we get flashes of Jonah, we get flashes of Lestat dropping him, all the things that he's gone throughout his life, but he still has the ability, to dream beautiful things. And I think that was what terrified him, is that his child never had that she just had this thing where she would have been scared to sleep. And then, of course, he realizes that just wasn't true. But no matter what she put in her diary, she did dream. She did have this ability to escape when she closed her eyes. And that is like the most beautiful gift he could have received. And the scene where he is thanking Daniel for that, and Daniel literally has to look away, it's astonishing work. Absolutely astonishing work. And then we end our slightly dull, I suppose, segue into the Romanian human beings by poor Amelia, who we've only just been introduced to, having been attacked by the ghoul monster outside. And it's an interesting, only because this is the first time we see Louis turning away from humanity. Like, he spent all those years with Lestat, openly mourning the fact that Lestat took his humanity away, complaining about, am I a monster, blah, blah, blah. And here well, there's not much he can do in this situation, to be honest, without revealing Claudia and himself to people that we don't want to be revealing ourselves to, particularly when, again, They're still the only black people in the room. They're surrounded by a military power. You know, he needs to keep quiet for Claudia's sake, but it's the first time we've seen him be like, human problems, not my monkey, not my circus. And out he wanders while they merrily chop Amelia's head off. So it is the first time that we see Louis being like, no, vampires are more important than humanity, which I think is a real turning point for him. And we go out, and Claudia is so excited to see the gross vampire. I feel bad. And then, of course, it all goes horrifically wrong in 5 seconds because, of course, it attacks them. Of course, it tries to kill Louis. So Claudia, again, in her role as protector, does the only thing she can do and brutally blinds it, which is horrific, causing its mother to beat it to death. We are introduced to the character of Daciana, who is played by, and I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, so please apologies, Diana Georgian. She is a Romanian actress. She looks phenomenal because of how tall she is and how angular she is. She looks great. All the costuming, Harold Cutzel's costumes here, look great. And she's kind of like, I don't know, a demented mother vampire, I guess, trying to build her own coven from the dead and dying soldiers that she sees around them. But of course, the war has affected the blood, so all of her children are, well, gross. They're all really, you know, grim and grotesque, and she's feeding blood to one of the soldiers that he attacked, but you can see that he's not quite right. They're not turning, because the whole point was, you know, Louis was made out of love, Claudia was made out of guilt, but all of these vampires, they're kind of just being made out of misery. So of course they've got no chance. They've got no chance at all. And she just casually offs her child. And then we have, you know, this whole sequence where Claudia is so happy to meet her. And we get Daciana's beautiful monologue about life and what she's going to do. And it's just this really weird juxtaposition because you sort of feel that at Claudia's age, she should have seen how that monologue was going. And yet the light in her eyes, she's so convinced that Louis are going to be rolling around Europe with their brand new vampire friend who goes from we own the night to we own nothing and then hurls herself in the fire. And it was, again, I feel like the whole 5 years has been, I mean, apart from showcasing that there are very few vampires left, because as she said, everything from darkness goes into darkness. But it's a way of sort of showcasing that she's really a little bit sheltered, I suppose. She kind of expected Louis to leave Lestat and everything that was at the door as if it meant nothing, when that was never going to be the case. She meets this incredibly depressed vampire and just assumes it's all going to work out magically and they're going to have happy, fun family times. And I think maybe it's a way of slightly toughening up Claudia before she lands in Paris, where she's thrown into an entirely different set of terrible circumstances. But yeah, that kind of ends the mad Indiana Jones portion of the tale. And then we flash back to the modern day where we get the first look at Armand and Louis' bedroom. And I mean that, like, a lot of people read a lot of things into the show, and I will maintain at the end of the day, this is not a subtle show. Does the bedroom walls look like bars? Yes. Yes, it does. That entire bed, it's got some beautiful lighting, but that is not a warm bedroom. All of it looks like bars. They obviously have great affection for each other, but There's no passion. They've been together for a very long time. They're in beautiful sleepwear on this massive bed. It's not the same as Louis and Lestat, who slept curled up into each other the whole time in one coffin. We are purposely showing that they are surrounded by bars, they are surrounded by brutalist architecture, they are cozy but unpassionate. And then we get Louis talking about the pages that have been removed from Claudia's diary. And we never really got to the bottom of that, did we?
No.
It's one of the series' enduring mysteries, and I wonder if they're going to come back to it. So, and we spoke a lot about the audacity of these men removing Claudia's words from her diary. It's bad enough that everyone is reading Claudia's diaries, which were never meant for public consumption, and that Louis is putting them in his book for everybody to consume. But they have removed her words, and we don't know why. So yeah, bad Louis, bad Armand. And Armand is like, "Oh, you've lost control of the interview. You know what would help? If you had me, your loving, kind, supportive boyfriend by your side. Would that help? It would." And so they walk in the next day, dressed in matching morning clothes this time. And Armand officially joins the interview, which really just gives him more of an opportunity to ogle Daniel, because he is full on hard eyes. Daniel, absolutely not buying a word of it. He's just like, "Morning, fellas, okay." And the fact that he starts with shushing Armand, who is deeply insulted by the shushing, is my favorite bit. Because Armand is like, "Oh yeah, we already covered." He's like, "Yeah, shush, we'll get to you." And then we end with my favorite sequence in the entire show, which is the whole world was ready to return sequence. We have Daniel Hart's beautiful, beautiful music, and we have Louis and Claudia in the back of a truck on the way to Paris. The lighting in this sequence is absolutely stunning. It brings me to tears every single time. I watched it last night. I was like, "I'll be fine." Nope, started crying halfway through. Total weakling. And we have Louis telling Claudia, "Look, life's been shit. It's going to be shit again." Says they can't run away again, which I think is really interesting. We get the absolutely devastating line, "As long as you walk the earth, I'll never taste the fire," which he's saying to Claudia, which of course is true. We also have a really interesting line of, "We can't be the only good ones out there." And of course, that's deeply subjective as to whether Claudia and Louis were ever good. And the beautiful line, "If you were the last vampire on Earth, that would be enough." And then, of course, halfway through this, we realize he's not just talking to Claudia, he's talking to Lestat as well. So while the you and me and you is Claudia, it's still them, it's still the unholy family, them all together, because everything he's saying applies to Claudia as well as Lestat. And we just get that shot very quick at the end of Lestat with his, brutally gouged neck, and the look of love that Dreamstat gives to Claudia. And I appreciate it is Louis' subconscious, but it is also a recognition, I think, on Louis' part that, yeah, of course Lestat loved Claudia. Of course he did. It's such a beautiful, beautiful sequence. It's my favorite. I think Daniel Hart's music is stunning. And where is my vinyl? Where is my vinyl, AMC? Every other crappy soundtrack gets like an exclusive colored vinyl with fun art cards. Where is my Interview with a Vampire vinyl? I fear they're just going to put out a Vampire Lestat one and not do the earlier ones. And like, I get it. We've said this repeatedly. Everyone has to not take offense at the probable much larger degree of merch available for this show, on the grounds that the vampire rock star is a really easy gimmick. But if they if they produce a vinyl of Sam Reid singing and not the earlier ones, Daniel Hart's beautiful, beautiful music, I'm going to be grumpy because it is my
That's
favorite
fair.
sequence in the entire show. I just think it's absolutely stunning. Do you love it as much as me?
I don't think I necessarily love it as much as you, but I definitely think it's a powerful scene. And when he does deliver that line of, it would be enough, and then the camera widens out, and then you see Lestat sat next to Claudia, and there is that whole, oh, he doesn't strictly mean Claudia. It does,
It's
it
both
does
of them.
make
It's
him.
both of them. Yeah, it's a recognition that you and me and you has always included Lestat, and that as much as he loves Claudia with every fiber of his being, he still includes Lestat in that. But it's the line of "as long as you work the earth, I'll never taste the fire." Is just so absolutely devastating because he does go into the fire even though he knows that Lestat is somewhere out there in the world because he can't cope without Claudia. He can't cope without Claudia, and he thinks that Lestat has betrayed him by murdering their daughter. It's absolutely devastating. It's a wonderful piece of foreshadowing. The lighting is incredible. I've seen people with, I think there's a tattoo artist called Ben Rose. I've seen him tattoo uh, the Dreamstat from this sequence on people. And I know that people have used Daniel Hart's music in like moments in their lives, like weddings and things. So incredible. Um, yeah, definitely my favorite sequence. Definitely a beautiful sequence to end it on. But yeah, apart from Jacob Anderson's astonishing acting, it's an episode where you get to the end of it, weirdly, not much has happened, but lots of
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful, absolutely essential character beats. And like we're about an hour in, and this is probably the quickest we've ever done for a recording because there's not really that much more to say about it, is there?
One thing that this episode does do is it offers some interesting stuff about vampire lore. This whole thing where when
Yes.
we first meet them, they're in these heavy coats, and it's like, can vampires get cold? Like, I assumed that they were dead,
Mm,
that they could just go around wearing anything. And then obviously you get the conversations later on where, Louis is saying that the blood is tainted, and therefore, the misery is sort of getting into their bones, and now they feel cold, which presumably they haven't felt before. And then that opens up an interesting line for what's going to come in series 3 with, Lestat and his drug blood. It's obviously they
mm,
take on the qualities of the mood of the people that they are eating. So here they've got nothing but fearful, miserable, dying soldiers to feast on. So it's all misery business. But then you get to Lestat in season 3, and he's going to be eating like happy, drunk, drug-altered little groupies, and he's going to be having a whale of a time. Well, until obviously, I assume he gets haunted by visions of everything he's done wrong in his life. But it kind of, again, we are foreshadowing season 2, episode 1, where we might go in season 3, episode 1.
yeah, I mean, we've said before that the degree to which they plant these things is really impressive because the train scene has always been off. And if we are going to be revisiting it in series 3, that's like some degree of planning. And yeah, we're going to have a PTSD riddled Lestat, which, let's be honest, is fair enough because he was beaten throughout his childhood. His mother effectively sexually abused him. Um, that will be discussed, but I'm sorry, no child can consent to that kind of relationship. So yeah, she was weird. Um, he turns mummy. Mummy immediately leaves him because fuck you, I want my own life, which is fair enough. Go for you, Gabrielle. Gets with Nikki, who is profoundly depressed, who then is kills himself with an awful lot of help from Armand. We then get he's in the ground for 100 years. We get Louis. He falls in love with Louis. He doesn't know how to be a husband or a father and is spectacularly terrible at it. He abuses Louis. Louis quite correctly kills him. And then he watches his daughter be set on fire directly in front of him. And we're supposed to assume he's just fine. Oh, and then he rots for 77 years effectively in a shack eating rats. So, from a mental health perspective, yeah, I can see that Lestat's not doing tremendously well. And then you stick a boatload of drugs on top, and the poor boy's not going to be doing all that good. No wonder that Louis is going to be like, Jesus Christ. I'm very much looking forward to seeing kind of not together, but team Lestat and Louis in series 3. I think it'll be really interesting to see their dynamic where they're sort of together but not together and how that plays out. But yeah, it's an episode with so many beats. Like we see really interesting beats with Armand and Daniel and how much more interested he is in him than he should be. We see all the little glimpses of Armand trying to be super controlling through the guise of being a good boyfriend. And then we get them to Paris, where I'm sure that all beautiful things are going to happen to them. It's going to be lovely. They're going to have lots of beautiful French food, and nothing will go bad again. Bit of a filler episode. I can understand why it is rated lowly, because it is an episode of moments rather than an episode that you're like, I really need to rewatch this again. Like, if I wanted to rewatch it, I would probably skip most of the Romanian stuff. Just because, I mean, there's not a ton and there's not a ton for Delainey Hayles to do actually in this episode as well. We don't get much of a glimpse of her Claudia because it's slightly muddled because she only really comes into her own once we hit Paris, I think.
Very bitty episode because there's the traveling, and then there's the bit in Romania, and then they go and visit the other vampires, and then they're on then they're traveling in Paris. So yeah, she's not really given a chance to demonstrate who she is because she's always on the move. And yeah, I think once we get to Paris that we get to the crux of Delaney's iteration.
Yeah, and her Claudia drives me insane in equal measure because she's so wonderfully excited to meet Kin that I've always said I felt that the better judgment that allowed her to best Lestat goes out of the window because she's so excited to meet everybody, and because Louis is absolutely shit at office politics and has no idea about the dimensions of a group, because of course he just had to deal with Lestat, who was, effectively, like equivalent of a service top, getting him everything he wanted. He has no idea how to handle people. And I feel like Louis consistently, God bless him, makes it worse by his lack of understanding of the group dynamics. And yeah, Claudia calling Armand Maitre, as we'll see in later episodes, considering she left Lestat because she was calling him their master, is a deeply frustrating character development, but consistent with someone who is desperate to find family at all costs. So yeah, but yeah, it is Delainey shines as soon as you get her to Paris and we get the opportunity to see what she is really made of, and it is a wonderful, wonderful version of the character, and she's so, so good. But yes, we leave them on their way to Paris, finally arriving, and their Parisian adventures and the Théâtre de Vampire await.
Yeah, and we will be back next time to discuss episode 2. Do you know what it means to be loved by death? In the meantime, if you have enjoyed our thoughts and ramblings on the show, please do give us a like, rating, and follow wherever you are listening to us. You can also find us across various social media platforms, and all the links to those are in the show notes wherever you're listening to us. So yes, thank you for joining us as we embark on this journey into series 2 and the devastation that awaits us at the end.